Hello, my name is Chuck Wolf. Over the years, I've worked in many different roles, including leading my own leadership consulting company since 1994. I've worked for and with some of the best companies and universities in the world, and have had the opportunity to work with government officials, military organizations, and public and private schools. I'm a leading expert and pioneer in emotional intelligence. Since 2009, I have been a volunteer hosting a radio show I created called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I really enjoy making a difference in people's lives. The show is on award-winning community radio station, WPKN in Bridgeport, Connecticut. In recent years, Simsbury Community Television has been sharing my shows on their station and on YouTube. My sincere hope is that everyone who watches regularly will learn how to use the Emotion Roadmap in their own lives by listening to people who call in to get help with challenges at work, home, and in communities. To learn more, go to www.emotionroadmap.com. If you have a comment or question, email me at cjwolf@cjwolf.com. Thank you and enjoy the show. And this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. It's great to be back with you. This is the month of November. It's the first Wednesday in the month, and I'm on the air the first and second Wednesdays. And you're again listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. If you've been waiting to talk to me and you're a regular listener, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to allow you to give me a call right away. It looks like the phones are working, and we're transitioning from one studio to another studio, and so I'm hoping that that doesn't impact the ability for me to take phone calls. I don't think it will, but let's hope so. Let's hope so. So the number to call, if you're waiting to call me, 203-336-9750. I'm sorry, 9756. 203-336-9756. So if you want to give me a call and you've been waiting to talk with me, the show again is the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. If you're new to the show and you don't know what the show is about, the show is about taking control over your emotions, understanding how emotions work, understanding how difficult decisions, challenging situations in your life are almost always impacted by emotions, sometimes in others that you're dealing with, but often within yourself. And this show is designed to teach you a little bit about the science of emotional intelligence and how it might be helpful to you in your current circumstance. And by calling in and talking to me about what's going on in your life and looking for a little bit of help from somebody who spent a lot of years helping people with this kind of thing, you'll benefit not only yourself, hopefully, but everybody that's listening. The reason for the show is that I think that every one of us can benefit from understanding more about how do our emotions impact us. How do our emotions impact critical decisions? How do our emotions impact us when we're uncertain or confused or despairing, depressed? How do emotions impact us when we're joyous and we can't afford to be joyous in a current circumstance? How do our emotions impact lives in general? I do a lot of work inside organizations around the workplace and how organizations impact people at work, but organizational work always benefits from people knowing more about how emotions matter. When you're thinking about how do you engage employees, motivate others, influence others, sell to others, negotiate with others, all of that has tremendous amount of emotions involved in what you're doing with yourself, within yourself, and also with others in the workplace. But these are life skills, really. And so people call in, if you haven't heard the show before, about situations at home, in their communities, neighborhoods, religious organizations, clubs they belong to, sports teams, musical groups, whatever it might be. If you're having any kind of issue that you feel has some strong emotions in it, that's the kind of thing that we look for people to call us and talk with us about. And then I introduce you to this idea of an emotion roadmap. And the emotion roadmap is a process, a methodology, a template, you can call it any one of those things, about guiding people through how to deal with emotions successfully, more successfully than you might have in the past. And when you're stuck, when smart people are stuck, it's often because what I find is true is that often people who are stuck, really good critical thinkers, good problem solvers, when they can't solve a problem, when their critical thinking seems to be kind of convoluted and doesn't seem to be working the way that it normally does, to me, what I find is that it's almost always something emotional is generating some conflict. And because we don't have the same skills around emotional planning as we do around other kinds of planning, then we're stuck and we're not sure what to do. And we all get through life, so one way or another we make a decision and move forward. But what if that decision was more thoughtful around the emotional impact that decision was going to have on you as an individual, you as a family member, the other people in your family or in the workplace, whoever's surrounded by you that's going to be impacted by this decision? What if you thought through what emotionally this decision is going to create if you do A, and what it would create if you do B or C? And how do the emotions play out? How do you want them to play out? And how does that influence and guide what you do? So I'm convinced that our behaviors are driven by our thoughts, the way we talk to ourselves, the things we say to ourselves, and that those things that we think are often strongly influenced by the emotions we're feeling. So if you want to really change behavior, you've got to understand, well, what emotions are driving the thoughts that are driving the behaviors. So that's what the show's about. So again, let me ask you if you'd like to give me a call. I'm Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. And the tagline is take the wheel and control how you feel. And you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM. And now, one of the interesting things is that Carl Frano just told you, if you were listening to his great show, that one of the things that is happening is we're transitioning. Carl won't be back for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, we're going to be in our new studios, downtown Bridgeport. Everybody's very excited about that. But I'm back here next week. So I've got one more week in this studio before saying goodbye to these stomping grounds. And Carl's been here over 30 years. I'm on my 13th year in December. I'll be beginning of my 13th year. So it's been a while for me too, and I'm enjoying it. So if you want to give me a call, 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Now, since I'm not on daily and people don't know that I'm on all the time, and sometimes people schedule me in, I love that. You use your smartphones, put me on your calendar on the first and second Wednesday of every month at 12 noon Eastern time, then that's great. But a lot of people just, tune on the radio when they can. And so maybe you're catching me for the first time. Maybe you're a regular listener. But I love it when people call in because it's always interesting to engage with somebody, to help somebody out. I love helping people. I like making a difference in people's lives. And if I can, I will. And I love the idea that when people call in, not only am I helping you when you make that call, but I'm also helping everybody that's listening to understand how this process can help them too. And a lot of the things that people deal with, they think are unique to themselves, which is a really fascinating idea that many years ago when I was a student studying psychology and learning about this fellow named Harry Stack Sullivan, he had something that has stayed with me all my life since then, which is this idea that many of us carry around with us this idea of what he called the delusion of uniqueness. We think we're the only one that's depressed about this kind of thing or whatever that kind of thing is. Or whatever our situation is, we think we're the only one that's encountered or adapted deal or is having to deal with it or is having trouble dealing with it. And yet so many people have so many similar experiences. It's really kind of fascinating. And because I've worked all my life really in this field of emotional intelligence, it really didn't get called that until the late 1990s. But I've worked really with people and relationships since 1960s, That's when it started for me. And so it's been a long time, and I'm good at it, and I'd like to be helpful to you because I enjoy helping people, and it's a big win for me if I can help you. So if you want to call in, it's 203-336-9756. Call in about anything. It's a relationship with anybody at work, at home, in the community, wherever it might be. And because I don't always get callers right away, I like to come in with topics that I want to just share and chat about so that I kind of prime the pump, if you will. There's a couple things that I thought were worth talking. Well, several things actually. I'd like to sort of just bring up today as possible reasons why you might call if you don't have something pressing that you want to talk about. But just anything I feel that involves strong emotions is kind of worth talking about on the show, even if we're not trying to solve a problem. So one of the things I wanted to do today is I wanted to, in a sense, dedicate this show to someone that I loved and respected dearly who just passed away. It's a sad note, and I've had moments of really deep sadness actually around this. But I have such a strong, wonderful memory of this man. He is my uncle. His name was Haskell Hannock. He was not a rich man, but he was a rich man in the way that people don't often think of being rich, and that was with his attitude towards life. He was someone who could accept whatever came his way and somehow had a grace and a calmness and an optimism that just always felt things would work out. Even in his last years when he was in a nursing home, well, it was assisted living, but he had just his own room and wasn't able to do much for himself. I mean, whatever it was, even when he faced things that most people would feel devastated by, he had a way about him that, how you doing, Uncle Hack? I'm doing fine. How you doing, Chuck? What's new with you? How's your family? I mean, he was someone that, as an uncle, I don't know many uncles that do this. I don't, as an uncle, do this. But he would call my wife and I on our we have the same birthday. He would always call us and want to just make sure that we knew that he was thinking about us on our birthdays, and he would just talk with us. He was someone that whenever I called him, and we shared some interest in the Boston sports scene. As a young boy, man growing up in the Boston area, sports are, as many of you may know, you've heard me talk before. It's part of your, it's part of what you grow up with, part of your DNA to care about the Boston teams, at least some of them. And I've been a strong Red Sox fan, a strong Celtics fan, a strong Patriots fan, and a reasonably, occasionally strong Bruins fan. Anyway, we shared that, so we'd talk some sports, we'd talk about family, because he loved talking about family. He actually took the time some years ago to investigate our family tree, and now he was not sophisticated at all with technology. So he did things the old-fashioned way. He went to libraries. He looked things up. He wrote letters to people. He found ways to get people's phones that were on this tree that we didn't know anything about, that was somehow related to our family. And he would call them and say, "Hey, I'm Haskell Hannock, and I see that we have this common ancestor, and I just thought if you have a few minutes, I'd just like to share with you a little bit about our side of the family and understand more about yours and you." And people, I don't know that I've ever met anyone that didn't really like this person. He'd meet people in the supermarket and start up a conversation. He'd talk to delivery men. He was somebody who just loved talking to everybody. And I can't tell you a soul that didn't like talking to him. And so while I'm sad about his passing, I'm glad he passed without much pain. My memories of him are so powerful and so positive. A lot of people wrote in Facebook where it was posted about this. They said, "May his memory be a blessing." And I thought to myself, his memory is already a blessing. His memory already is a blessing. And that's how I feel about it. So if you've got somebody in your life that's recently passed away that you want to talk about a little bit and just share why they were special in your life and what made them special, I'm happy to entertain those kind of calls today. I don't think that's depressing. I think that's uplifting to know that people aren't forgotten, that certain people that leave behind a legacy of kindness, of caring, of loving, of respecting, of others, they're not forgotten. We don't forget other people, too, that we may not like as much. But if you have a person in your life that you'd like to chat a bit about, and you want to say something about them and talk about them, I'm happy to entertain that today. Again, the number is 203-336-9756. So I hope that's not a message of sadness as you hear it. I hope that you understand the message that I have about my uncle is what a lovely, wonderful man, and I'm so thankful he was in my life. Sometimes when I'd be upset with something in my life that things didn't go the way I wanted them to go, occasionally what would pop into my mind is my uncle's view of life. You know, you're rich if you understand what you have. You'll never be rich if you always are looking for and looking for what you don't have. And again, he didn't have much. You know, in terms of financial success, he had some small financial success, but nothing significant. It was much more about the people he surrounded himself with, the people he got to know, the people who got to know him, always really cared about this person because they knew he cared about them. And again, I think of that as uplifting. So that's the story about my uncle. So I'll give you a minute. If you want to call in, you got some story you'd like to share about somebody special to you. Again, I'm Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The number is 203-336-9756, and we've got our first caller. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air.
Oh, hi, Chuck. Yeah, I'm calling about a story, an emotional story, but it's my story.
Sure.
Can I share?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, what was your first name, just so I can address you?
Claire.
Claire. Okay, thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Chuck. Well, I'm an older woman, and I fell in love with someone. I've been married and divorced twice and have 5 great kids, but I've had a hard time trusting this person, and we're at a point where it's been a roller coaster because I keep pushing him away, and he's proven to have been lying to me about certain things that I thought were happening. And not to lie to trick me, but to not lose me. And I'm at a point now, it's been 6 months, and I just, I wish we could just start all over, because he's contrite, but I'm not sure. So I'm kind of taking a little sabbatical, a pilgrimage to figure out my soul's destiny, to find my soul. So that's where I am.
So Claire, you would like some sort of thoughtful response to kind of where are you and what you're feeling and what do you want to feel and how do you get there? Kind of. I'm trying to understand. You sort of are at a decision point where you're on hold with this relationship, and you kind of just want to explore with me whether it's worth going forward again?
Yeah, well, I do want to take a time out. I told him in the beginning I wasn't quite ready because a lot of my work situation was really unhealthy and very bad. And it was affecting me emotionally. So, I wasn't ready from the beginning, which was in April. And I'm still not ready. But, I kind of discovered some of his deceit, and he finally admitted it. Not like he was with another woman or anything, but just certain things that, just weren't truthful.
Okay, well, I don't need to go through what the things were, but I do want to just understand. So, how are you feeling now about the relationship? What would you say? How would you describe your feelings about the relationship?
Well, like I said, I wish we could start over, go a lot slower, build the trust instead of within a day he was telling me he was madly in love with me, and I'm like, whoa, Yeah. And and then I kind of corrupted the relationship, telling my friends only the bad things about this. And he met all my children, and it was good. But then I shared some bad things, and then they're like, "Oh, get away! He's no good," And it's like, but my heart and my body and my spirit say one thing, but then on another, it's like, am I repeating bad relationships? It's just.
No, I understand.
So that's why I'm going on a full journey.
Okay.
And I didn't tell him I was going away.
So let me say a couple things. Well, first of all, let me just this is separate from our conversation, Claire, but somebody else is trying to call. I just want to say no one else is at the station right now. So as long as anybody hears me talking to you, they can call after we're done, but I can't pick up when they're, just so people know that. As far as the relationship you have with this man and whether you go forward or not, I asked you how you were feeling, and what I gathered from that is distrusting and yet drawn towards him somehow.
Correct.
And so the question you want to feel is, can I, based on how strongly you feel drawn towards him, can I feel trusting again? And then the question becomes, you've had, not the question, but if I listen to some of the other, is that a buzz, a beeping in your side?
Yeah.
Okay.
I fixed it.
Oh, okay. So if there's something that is happening that has to do with relationships that you've had in the past, and there's something familiar that feels like, hey, I've been down this path before and it doesn't ever work, that we should explore a little bit before we talk about any solutions, because you said something about that. You said you had a couple other relationships, marriages, and they didn't work out. And does this feel at all like it has some of the same elements and that's one of the concerns you have. So can you tell me a little bit more about your concern about that?
About the familiarity?
Yeah. Does it seem like you're going down? Yeah. I like to talk about pathways that when we've been on them in the past and they feel familiar and they never end well. One of the ways I use this emotion roadmap is that, holy cow, I'm going down this same road again. I can't even believe I'm doing this. I got to find a way off this path.
Mm-hmm.
And does it feel like that to you?
No, it really didn't feel like that. But I just know that in the beginning I wasn't ready. And he kept persisting. And, there's some boundary issues there with him. But, I'd always say I need some time and space. And now I'm taking my time and space. But I was a lot younger in those relationships. I haven't really been in a relationship for like 20 years.
A long time.
But the factor is a deceit. It's deceit and being tricked and lied. So that's been the pattern in my past.
Okay.
And it kind of happened in this situation also.
That's the familiarity part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so one of the things you have to decide is if you wanted to start over. I mean, you can always in your mind say to yourself you want to start over, but I think emotionally you're not really starting over. You know what I'm trying to say? That there's like cognitively you can say, yeah, I'm going to give you another chance, but it's like there's a threshold of how much misbehavior or deceit I can handle. And you push past that boundary, and I don't know that I can deal with that. I mean, I had that in my past. I don't know that a relationship is worth it, even though part of me is really craving this relationship.
Correct. Exactly.
So then the need for you is to decide, what am I willing to risk here?
Mm-hmm.
And is the risk worth the benefit? I can't, and no one can tell you, and I don't even think this person could tell you that he's going to be trusting the entire time you might be with him if you start over. I mean, because he's already proven that he was remorseful, you said, he was contrite, and yet he did it. And he said he loved you, but he also betrayed you at some level.
Correct.
And so when something like that happens, some people, Claire, I'm not saying you, but some people feel like you betrayed me, we're done. there's no ever coming back from that. On the other
Right.
hand, other people say you betrayed me, and if I want to give it another chance because I really want this relationship to work. But I got to tell you, if something like this or anything close to it happens again, then there is no coming back, and that's another possibility, right?
Correct.
And a third possibility is just to say this guy's going to betray me at times, but it's worth it. Now, I know that's hard to hear, but that's another way of thinking about this is that some people have relationships with others that are deceitful at times, but they think it's worth it. Now, I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying those are choices that you have in front of you right now. There may be variations on the theme, but basically, I never want to see you again. I don't want to deal with it. It's just not worth. Much as I love being in a relationship, and it's great that after 20 years to have a relationship, I just can't handle somebody betraying me anymore. And you did it, and we're done. And that's one choice. The other is, if it, I'd like to make this work again, but please understand, I'm at the end of my line with this. This has happened to me before. I suspect it might happen again. I don't want it to happen. I'm willing to give you another chance, but you screw up and there is no coming back. Don't even try. And then there's the last choice, which is that, you know what? The guy's going to be deceitful. You go into it knowing that, but it's worth it to you because you like being in a relationship and you're not going to let the deceit define you. That's part of it. It's like when this person broke your trust, what did you say to yourself about yourself? That's the concept of the emotion roadmap. What are the thoughts going through your mind? And you can, and part of that is, can you change what you say about it if it were to happen again, so it's not as painful?
Well, the thing before I found out about the first deceit was that I was having all these images and visions and lucid dreams and dreams about what was happening. And I shared it, and he assured me that that wasn't happening. But then, lo and behold, after only 2 months into the relationship, I found out my visions and dreams and images were valid and true.
Yeah.
So it's like my
your intuition was on target.
My intuition has been on target.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you probably do, like the myth of Cassandra, the Cassandra complex, where
go ahead.
Given, the Jungian thought about knowing what is going to happen, and then being disbelieved. It's like living in disbelief. That was the theme in all my marriages.
Fascinating.
And the disbelief by my partner or from the world really kind of literally could drive me crazy.
So what if you were to influence this in a way? Again, part of how we deal with our emotions is that we have something happen, and then we have a thought about what that means, and then we have an emotional reaction to the thought. Not actually to the actual action, but to the thought we have about the action. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
And so one of the things that, honestly, if a lot of people had that, I don't know if you want to call it a talent, but it seems like a talent or a skill, whatever you want to define, the ability to perceive others' deception.
Right.
I don't know how many marriages wouldn't make it. Do you know what I'm saying? Some people just, maybe they're small things, but they don't want to have a conversation about something. They just want to do something that the other person doesn't, they don't want the other person to know about somehow. And so if yours are vivid in your dreams, that's a hard thing to let go of unless somehow you influence those dreams that, I know this is happening, but I'm okay with it. Somehow, even in your dreams, to have the feeling, I'm feeling this, I'm understanding that something isn't quite right, but I'm okay with it, to the point that, it's going to happen, but we're going to confront it and move on and stop that at this time and have another few weeks, few months where it's great, and then we're going to have another kind of thing, and it's just part of what's going to happen in life, and I'm okay with that. And that's the middle choice.
Mm-hmm.
Or the third choice, actually, which is that you're not really going to change anything. You're just going to say, "Hey, I get it. This guy loves me. I believe that he's not lying to me, but he's also distrustful, and that's just who he is. That's part of the deal. I seem to have picked several people that are like that, but maybe I'm more attuned to people's deceptions than others might be because of this, this ability to dream these things, because that's unusual. And I think maybe living with it is a choice that seems somewhat reasonable. Or if I don't think you should give it up. Because, if you're older and you're saying that you haven't been in a relationship in 20 years and this guy says he loves you, I'm guessing that part of that's real for him, and that you felt that was real and that was why it was worth it. But I don't know how much you can take of this if your dreams are really going to continue and it's going to fester and bother you to the point that it's not really worth being in the relationship. That's sort of where the choice is for you.
Right. That's why I need to kind of leave the country for a while.
But if you left the country, you'd find somebody else, and the same thing would happen. I mean, this is sort of who you are too.
What, leaving?
No. I mean, just your ability to discern deceit. I mean, that's unusual, right? So you would pick that up somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't think leaving the country changes anything. I think it's more about you just putting a stake in the ground, saying this is what I'm going to live with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm literally going on a pilgrimage. So.
Oh, okay. Well, if that helps, to clear your mind and give you some space and just do something that, just kind of allows you to think this through and decide what choice you want to make, and then be okay with it.
Yeah.
I think the dwelling on it and the constant, reflecting on it, that's sucking up a lot of energy, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, so if you want to just decide, hey, there's a lot of people in life that are decent people, but they're not always honest.
Right.
And they do deceive others, and maybe it's unkind and maybe it's malicious even. But if the kind of things that have happened are not unkind and malicious, they just are lies. I mean, there's different levels of lying, I think. Then I'm going to be okay with this guy, or I'm not. But I think I think it's more about you putting a stake in the ground and just deciding to live with this, whatever way you go.
Right. Exactly. All right.
Does that help?
Thanks, Chuck. It does.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thanks for the call, Claire. Nice to
Thanks,
talk to you.
Chuck.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I didn't really play out the whole emotion roadmap scenario, but essentially, how are you feeling? How do you want to feel? What can you do to get there? But we did talk about essentially, the feelings that were being created, the feelings that were there, the combined feelings of wanting and desiring, the feeling of desire of a relationship versus the reality of relationships often have some deceit attached to them, unfortunately, and trying to live with that or not, and making a decision so it doesn't constantly, you're not always at odds within yourself, because that's where the real struggle is here. Okay, so that's the idea behind the show, folks. Again, I'm Chuck Wolf. This is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. You're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM. We're broadcasting from the University of Bridgeport, but we won't be for very long. We're going to be broadcasting from State Street in downtown Bridgeport soon, and we're looking forward to our new studio. So a number of the call is 203-336-9756. I began the show talking a little bit about my uncle and how important my Uncle Hack was to me, and that he's passed. But his memory is a blessing. The thought of him, whether before he passed or now that he's gone, whenever I think about my uncle, I'm always thinking, very positive, joyful thoughts, really. He was such a special guy. So if you want to talk about somebody like that and you have somebody in life you'd like to talk a little bit about, you can give me a call about that, 203-336-9756. And then another topic that I thought that might be worth talking about, not worth talking about, but I'd like to talk about, is the incredible run that in the World Series. Again, those of you who listen to the show regularly know that I'm a big baseball fan. I love the Boston Red Sox. But interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I loved the Boston Braves. Now, some of you, probably most of you, don't know that they were the original team that is the Atlanta Braves was once in Boston. They started in Boston. Warren Spahn was one of their pitchers, and they were a great team. It was fun. I liked the Braves as much as I maybe even liked them a little bit more than the Red Sox when they were here in Boston. When they were in Boston, but anyway, Atlanta Braves had the least number of wins to ever make a playoff, but they did make the playoffs, and they had some great series. And they were playing the Houston Astros, which I think most of the pundits, most of the analysts, the sports broadcasters, sports shows, almost everybody thought Houston was going to win this series, and and they didn't. I mean, they just the Atlanta Braves actually went to Houston. They were down. It was 3-2. Actually, Atlanta went up in the series, 3-1. And they could have won in Atlanta if they won the last game they played in Atlanta, but they didn't. And so then it became Atlanta 3 games, Houston 2 games, and then they went into Houston where the last 2 games were going to be played. And I think most people were picking Houston to win the series, even though they were down by a game. And instead, it was really fascinating to watch the very first inning of the game, because I watched the game last night. The very first inning of the game, the pitcher for Atlanta landed up with 2 runners on base, I think with no outs, and managed to get out of that first inning without giving up a run, and then settled down and pitched fantastic. And anyway, the Atlanta team landed up winning the game 7-0 in Houston to celebrate their first World Series since 1995. Special team, you might call them overachievers. No one saw them. No one picked them. I shouldn't say no one, but very few people picked them to be World Series champions, and there they were at the end, being given the trophy and holding it up and being world champs. So that was fun. So if you have any thoughts comments about the baseball season or World Series, you can give me a call. I know there's a lot of Yankees and Red Sox fans out here, and I think the Red Sox season's peak probably was when they beat the Yankees for the wild card. Well, of course, they beat Tampa, too, to get to play Houston. They lost to Houston. And then Houston lost to the Atlanta team. So anyway, so that's fun for me if you want to give me a call about any of the sports that are going on. I know there's other sports going on, too. I guess if I talk about emotional issues, as the show is, it's all about, I've always been, again, I'll stay on the sports theme for a minute. I've always been a Boston Celtics fan, a big fan. I grew up in the years when Boston Celtics dominated the National Basketball Association. They just kept winning championship after championship after championship. Those were the Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, Tommy Heinsohn years. They were fantastic for many years, and that's what I grew up with. And one of the things that defined them and defines lots of good sports teams, whether you're looking at Central Connecticut or you're looking at UConn or the University of Hartford basketball team that landed up going to the NCAAs for the first time this year, or Gino Auriemma's UConn women's team, which has defined, the definition of success in women's basketball for so many years. What causes teams to operate at such high levels? Well, it's often the emotional chemistry between people. The fact that people care about each other, have each other's backs, really want to do the best that they can. And it's not about their own statistics. It's about the team wins. It's doing whatever it takes for the team to win, being willing to come off the bench instead of being a starter, being willing to give the ball to the hot shooter and not take your own shots. Making sure there's ball movement, making sure you do everything you can to defend against the other team's offense and their ability to shoot the ball. I mean, it's all those things, right? And the Boston Celtics are the epitome of a losing team right now. They're doing none of that, and it's painful to watch. And what causes a team to not really want to try, to give up, to not play a full 48 minutes? Many of these athletes are getting lots of millions of dollars in some cases, to play a game that most of us, if we played it, it was just fun. We just did it for fun. They do it for a living. And yet, how do you go out on the floor and not give it your all. And as a coach, how do you motivate people? As a boss, how do you engage people? As a leader, how do you inspire others? Those are emotional challenges. So I think the Celtics and other teams would benefit a lot from sports psychologists working with them, people who understand how to motivate others, how to understand the blocks that are inside people that cause them to not play their hardest, not give it their all. What is it about people that causes that to happen? How do you improve on that? So if you have a sports story or you have a sports question, you want to talk about that, again, give me a call. If you're a regular listener, you know I had a friend of mine's a sports psychologist for the Minnesota teams, Minnesota Vikings, for the football team, for the Minnesota Twins, the baseball team, for the Timberwolves, the basketball team. He actually works for all of them, Rick Abraham. I had him on the show I think it was a year ago when the pandemic first hit because of what was happening in the sports world, right? How are athletes coping with, this idea of not being able to, in some cases they had to play in a bubble. Some cases that, they were having their teams being impacted, and it still is a little bit, where teams are impacted by people getting COVID and anyone exposed to them have to quarantine and you don't have the same players that you thought you had just a few days ago. I mean, a lot of things have been really crazy in the whole world, and sports was just one small piece of it. But anyway, I was very excited to see the Atlanta Braves. It was great. It was a great story and a great win. And if you have your story about a sports team you'd like to share that, I'm happy to entertain that call as well. And then finally, one last thing I'll talk about is I'm being, I think I mentioned this last time I was on the air. Probably didn't know last time I was on the air. I got asked to be a speaker for the Bologna Business School in Bologna, Italy. And I'm going to be doing that this Friday. I'm a keynote speaker for a group. And I'm talking about women in leadership, emotionally intelligent strategies for helping women get into leadership and to maintain their status in leadership. And there's so many interesting things about this, about why it's more of a struggle for women than it might be for men. And I'm happy to talk about that for a bit. Well, let me see if you've got any thoughts about that too, and you want to call in a bit about that. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that I understand that the group I'm going to be talking to is mostly men, which is really fascinating, right? So if I only emphasize all the things that you can do for women, how are the men going to feel in the class? I think about that. Even though the topic's about how do I elevate and how do organizations elevate women into the senior roles and maintain them there, how are men feeling about having quotas? My daughter's got a senior position in a very large chemical company, and she, I was asking her, what do you think? What are some of the thoughts you have, Becky, about this? And she said, one of the things that honestly that works, that nobody likes, but it works, is you have quotas, that people in senior management, they often get big bonuses in big companies. And that if you tie their bonuses pretty significantly to the number of diverse hires you put into place, and you punish them financially if they choose to just recruit the same person, the same type of person into their organization instead of looking for a diverse candidate, whether women or others, that gets change to happen. And nobody likes it because the women that get put in feel like I'm put in because I'm a woman. And everybody looks at that person and says, you got that job because you're a woman. And the woman feels like they're looking at me funny. I got to prove myself, as opposed to anybody that was a man that got into the same job. I mean, everybody has to prove themselves, but not the way people are looking at me. Because I got this job only because of my sex, which is silly because nobody gets the job just because of their sex. But you might have got chosen over somebody who might have had a little bit more competency than you, but wasn't a woman. And so that's a way to do it, but is that an emotionally intelligent way? I don't think so. But it does work. And one of the things that you might decide is that we'll We'll do this for a few years, and then we'll stop it, and people won't think about it anymore because we'll only hire really talented people into those spots, women who are extremely talented so that they're successful, and nobody at the end of 5 years is going to be thinking about this, and then we'll drop the quota, and we'll have more diverse kind of boards. So those are ways people are thinking about maybe changing things up, and some organizations are actually doing it. But are there other ways, other things, other ways that we can do this that actually don't cause other people to be upset? I don't think that there's any way that you can say, I want this group and not have other groups not be upset about that. I mean, think about what's going on at Harvard University. It's really interesting. It's not about women. It's about Asians. It's about too many Asians are hitting the merit achievements that they were looking for, and so there was an overflow of people who qualified for admission to a number of Harvard programs that began to weigh heavily on the organization, saying that, hey, wait a minute, we've got too many of this group and none of certain other groups, and so let's change it around and let's not use merit-based admissions so much anymore. How does that make you feel if you're somebody in the group that is saying, hey, we don't want so many of you here, so even though you have better marks, better test scores, better activities, and all the stuff that we look for normally, you're not going to get in because we want to put somebody in from this group. That's good too, but doesn't have your credentials. I mean, these are not easy questions, right? These are tough. So if you want to give me a call again, I got a little bit of time left this morning, 203-336-9756. Any other topics or something else. If you want to call about something you've got going on that you'd like some help with, again, I'm Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel, and you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM. I know I had a caller before that I couldn't take before, so do you want to call back? 203-336-9756. That's strange. Something on the phone board looks like it lit up. Let me try. I'm not sure if something looks like somebody might be trying to call. Again, 203-336-9756. Well, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like the phones might be working, so maybe you can't go through if you're trying. Well, this is... Studio's been up and running with this equipment for a long time. As Carl said, I think it's kind of neat that we're going to be going into state-of-the-art equipment. I'm sure we'll have our challenges with that too, just even learning how to use it. But it's nicer when you can to upgrade your equipment. But it's kind of I have a fondness for what's here. Again, the number if you want to try again, hopefully the phones work. 203-336-9756. All right, I don't have a caller at the moment. I'll tell you a little bit more about what's going to be in my talk on Friday. So one of the things that I've discovered is that this is a really interesting study. One of the things that people feel in the corporate world, across all countries, by the way, this is not just limited to North America or the U.S., is that oftentimes women don't get into senior leadership roles in part because of childcare and childbearing. And a lot of people look at that and they say, well, that makes sense. And people sometimes take a couple of years out, and so they fall behind a little bit in terms of what other people, again, men sometimes do this too, but it's more rare that it's a man and more often that it's a woman. So when you think about it that way, you look at it and you say, well, okay, I guess I could live with that. That makes some sense. Until you realize that there are women, many of who make the decision not to have children, never take time off for childbearing or child rearing, and they have the same problem. They don't get. I mean, the implications and what happens to them is the same. So the argument sort of dissipates when you realize, hey, that makes some sense. But if other women don't do that, and they still don't get into senior leadership roles, how come? That's interesting by itself, right? And then I think there's still an interesting implication about, well, sometimes people have to make decisions that are impactful in their lives in very meaningful ways as to how high they rise. Now, I think a lot of people start off in life and think, hey, I'd love to be president. I'd love to be a senior leader at some level, and maybe even at the top levels. Maybe I want to be chief executive officer. And then as you climb the ladder in organizations, many people experience overload. And sometimes some people love it. Some people love the fact that they're going nonstop to all kinds of places. Looks like I got a call. Let me take it. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
I'm sorry, wrong number.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that was the station number, so that didn't work. Okay. So anyway, if the idea of somebody trying to get into a higher office sounds great, and then you realize that, hey, wait a minute, I've got board meetings I've got to go to. I've got to meet with customers. I've got to go to customer events. I've got to travel a lot with this job. They expect me to join committees, to be on groups, maybe even on other companies' groups. And all of a sudden, my whatever number of hours I have a week, everything is business related, and I've got nothing really left for home. Now, that's not true in every case, but it's true in a lot. You can ask people who have made it to the very senior levels how much real time they've got at home. Now, at some point, when you are the chief person in your area, you're often left alone to make decisions about how you spend your time, because you may not be the top person. You may not have to be out with every group that has to do with your relationship with your company. And you may be able to work from home, especially today, in today's world, and you may be able to take time off for a birthday party or to go to a sporting event where your child is participating and still work around that and still get your job done when you're in charge of yourself. And a lot more managers are kind of moving in that direction. But currently, for most people at a very senior level, the expectation is you are going to do what the company needs in front of doing what you might want to do for your family or with your family. Now, not everybody buys into that. And so is that the same concern for a man as it is for a woman? Might be. Would you think possibly that more women might feel more concern around this than men? Maybe. Most people, I think, would say, yeah, probably. So is it a bit more of a struggle for a woman to actually want to advance? I think that's a piece of the puzzle. But you know what else is really interesting? Is that men are really confident with self-promotion. And again, there are women that are confident with self-promotion, but they're not looked at the same way as a man is when he does it. Why? I can't tell you why from a rational perspective, but I can tell you emotionally, it doesn't sit as well with most of us. And it doesn't sit as well with men, and it doesn't sit as well with other women. How about negotiations? There is research that's out there that says women don't negotiate the same way men do. When you look at this gender pay gap, and you ask why is that happening, this famous master negotiator I learned from this person's program. His name is Chester Karras. You might have seen his program advertised at different points in your life. But anyway, Chester Karras once said something that stuck with me. He said, you don't get paid what you're worth. You get paid what you negotiate. And that stayed with me forever. And I think, again, not every man is good at this, and not every woman doesn't do this well. But in terms of gender discrepancies, there's research that points out that women don't do this as often or as well as men. So there are reasons why certain things happen that have to do with the emotions underpinning our behavior. Is it changeable? Yeah, it is, but you got to really understand what it is first. What you really want to change to, whether it's worth it to change, just like the conversation I had with Claire. Is a relationship where there's going to be some deceit worth it? Or would you rather not be in a relationship at all? I actually had that conversation with a friend of mine today on the way into the show. It just, he's got a relationship that's a challenge in many ways. But if he wants it to work, you got to live with certain behaviors you don't like. And if you can't live with those behaviors, then you're not going to have the relationship, and you got to be okay with that. Otherwise, stop driving yourself crazy. I could say these things. It's not easy to do. Okay, I got to move on to the announcements now, folks. So I want to say thank you very much, everybody. It's been fun really talking to you today. So I hope for more phone calls, but I know it's a little tricky. I think people try to call and, the phones don't always work. So I'm going to be signing off in just a moment. So thank you for listening. This is Chuck Wolf. The show's The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And I'm going to be back again next week, and I look forward to talking with you then. Again, if you want to call and talk with me about any challenging situations, if you could diary to call me when the show starts at 12 noon on Wednesday the 10th, November 10th. It's actually one of my daughter's birthdays that day. If you could diary me to call me then, that'd be great. And I'll talk with you. I'm happy to. It's always a pleasure to visit with you when I can, and if I can help you, and I hope I helped Claire today, then it's a good day for me, and I hope it was a good day for you too. Thanks, everybody. And I'll be signing off now. Bye-bye.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.